don't apply, your success ratio is 0. If you apply, your success ratio is going to be greater than 0. It's a number game, and for actuary, that should be kind of appealing. It's a numbers game.
Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is V. I am a fully qualified actuary, a risk management professional, a creativepreneur, and a lifelong learner. And this is another episode of Get to Know an Actuary. So today I'm very pleased to have Elaine to be on our channel. She has an FCAS and she also has a CFA. Let's welcome Elaine to today's video. Hi Elaine, thank you very much for being here today and to share your experiences as an exec and a senior actuary. So first, can you please introduce yourself to our audiences and the career journey? What made you decide to pursue the actuarial profession back then when it was not that well known?
Oh, hi V, I'm so pleased to be here with you. And I'm not that old. Just want to put that out there. But I am the oldest of 4 children. I was the only girl. I grew up surrounded by boys or men. My dad was a policeman. My mom was a stay-at-home mom until I was much older. And I was amongst the first of my cousins to go to university. So I didn't really have any real role model. In my family, we were very modest, probably what we call today a working poor. I was wearing ends me down clothes. I paid for my first pair of jeans at 18. Growing up, there was a lot of trust and belief from my parents that I was going to go to university. And actually, this was not even put on my brothers. But for me, there was no options. I was going to go to university, which is not a bad thing to be in position with. And I decided to become an actuary after I read a magazine for teenagers that were featuring women in unusual career. So they were saying things like, it's not a 9-to-5 job, and it has a lot of maths. Both things are probably not really true. It was more like an 8-to-6 job. I think it was, that's how I made my decision. I decided basically to become an actuary. I made a lifelong decision on an article in a teenager newspaper. And, I thought, I didn't know anything about it at all. And I thought I was going to become a fellow very quickly. And that was certainly not my experience. It took me 12 years from starting university to receiving my passing mark on my final exam. And actually have a funny story about my fellowship as well. So I got my fellowship, I framed it, put it in a frame, put it on a wall at where I work. And about 10 years in my career after the fellowship, somebody looked at my diploma for the CERA and says, your diploma is not signed. So I had to go back to the CERA, get the president at that time to sign the diploma. So basically I'm the only actuary that has 2 diplomas, one signed and not one signed. And so that's a funny story, I thought. And as to why I decided to become a CAS actuary, I think, you always make a decision based on incomplete information, and that's a lesson for all of us. But I knew I liked fast-paced diversity, changing stuff, creating. And my impression as a student was that the PNC had more opportunity for creation than life and health or pension. Now, I've worked in that field now as well, and I know now it's not true, but that's how I made my decision. I think you wanted also to know how did I get to my career and which employer. And when you start university, you have all these illusions. And for me, I had this 3-year plan. So I was going to work 3 years in Quebec City, 3 years in Montreal, 3 years in Toronto, 3 years in the US, and 3 years in Europe. I did none of that. Like my first job I kept for 9 years. I've changed more job than most people. But it was always for a good reason. It was always to go and learn. And now I'm at the point in my career that I want to actually do another pivot. So I'm very excited about the future, but it's really we can make all the plans that we want, but they're not necessarily going to be what you actually live.
I can see that we all have some big plan when just getting out of university, because I give a big plans like, oh, I'm gonna go back to Asia in Vietnam and then and stuff. But I still ended up in Canada. Well, I'm happy to be working and living in Canada, but sometimes life is just take you where it wants to take you, I guess, and we just have to be ready for it.
So as you share about like being the only girl in the family with new real role model, so do you think it impacted your career choices and how you develop personally and professionally?
I imagine it did. But it's hard to think about it because this is never something, a dimension I ever thought about it, because maybe, like, just to give you an example, as I was growing up, not only was I living in a family with mostly boys, but the surrounding around me, like the neighborhood where I live, we had like probably 20 boys for 3 girls. And so I was kind of one of the boys. I never even think of myself as a woman. I didn't really have girls friend until I started working. So I think it's a part of me. But I really always believed that I was as intelligent as these guys. And I think that because most of the people I was hanging out with went to university and did the same kind of things I've decided to do. They became engineer, they went to medicine, they went to law school. Like it was kind of, you were caught in the momentum. But I really don't think that being a woman at that time when I was that young, and that came later on, but at 22, I don't think it influenced any way, shape, or form what I decided to do at that time. Now I know better, and I know that, I've been often the only woman in the meeting. And so I know there are limits, you have to break the mold. But it is at that time when I was 17, 15, 16, 17, it didn't really factor into my thought process.
Similar to my story as well. Well, I guess because my parents only have me and my sister, so we actually have two, so only girls around. So I didn't really think about the gender issue because like my parents were just, yeah, we only have 2 girls. Like, so.
May as well do whatever the best you can be, huh?
Yeah. So but then like you say, like when going to career more deeper in that, and sometimes you see like back when I'm volunteering for the Actual Foundation of Canada, like I was the only female on the board of director for a while until now we got to like bringing more female directors. So sometimes like I think it's just like career take you to, and then where we can see more of the differences, and and then trying to make it a little bit better in that sense. So I know that you also pursue the CFA, so that's the Charter Financial Analyst. So can you please share with us like why, what made you to decide to pursue it?
I think it's a bit of fear of being alone, a little bit of interest. So I felt that the syllabus for the CS was lacking in on the finance side. I also thought that when I was in university, if I didn't do an actual degree, I probably would have done finance. So I had an interest in that. I just had moved to Toronto. I was by myself. I knew no one. And, the weekend could be very lonely. And sometimes I would leave the office on Friday. And the next time I spoke to somebody was on the Monday morning when you're new to a new city and you don't have any friends. So I wanted to be productive and do something positive. So I decided to write the exam. And by the 3rd exam, I had lots of friends. I had many activities. I was running. I was playing curling, beach volleyball, and all these things. But it gave me a focus so that I would have something to do. And I was interested in it. So that's how I came to it. Sometimes it's not more complicated than you have the time.
Yeah, that's true. I myself actually pursue the CFA as well. And I would say that for work-wise, I think it's beneficial for me in the risk management area, in like the investment risk. Like, have you found it beneficial for you, particularly at work? And would you recommend other actuaries to pursue the CFA as well? Or like, when do you think an actuary should pursue this?
Well, I think already we have a big training and big education. And so it will really depend on the career aspiration and the interest. I think I don't think this is something that you actually need. But if you're interested in this is a great course and a great stuff. It also, I think for somebody like you that's in risk management, if you do a CFA, it gives you instant credibility around your counterpart in your organization. It had a dimension to your thinking, which is always great. It also helps you connect the two worlds, because often the insurance world and the investment world are disconnected and everyone is entrenched in their own view. So by taking the CFA, you kind of become a communication bridge. You can draw parallel. So I think it's a great tool to add to your background. and it makes you a more complete person in your particular case. So it will really depend, depending on the individual and what they do and what their career aspiration is, then that's when I would decide.
Okay, I think that's a very good point when you're saying about like bridging, like a bridge. It's like essentially it's like having the same language between the two different areas. And so like, I guess it's like actually we're more used to train in liability side, while the CFA or those investment folk is like more trained in the asset side. So now we're having more like a common language when talking to each other. So
yeah, and you're more realistic. You can see the problem on all aspects of it. So I think it makes you a very unique individual when you can do this both.
Yeah, for sure. So now let's talk a little bit about volunteering, because that's how we knew each other was through volunteering for the CIA. I guess I was the organizing a sessions. I was reaching out to you to become the speaker, and thanks again for like sharing your knowledge through FCIA sessions as well. So now, can you please share with us about your involvement in the actual community, and then like whether it has benefited you?
V, thank you for being a volunteer for the CIA. I think the CIA thrives on volunteer, and so it's really nice to see young people like you doing it. I like to give back. I'm somebody that I've always tried to help other people, and I'm a long time CIA volunteer. I actually become a fellow in 2000, and I joined the CIA in 2000, and I became volunteering in 2000. And my first role was actually to finalize the standard of practice that everyone is looking at right now. So so whatever we're using as standard of practice, I was part of the team that finalized them and finally got them through the finish line. And then I joined the PCFRC, which is the Property Casualty Financial Reporting Committee, which is probably the committee at the time. And so I joined, it was like very renowned actuaries, very seasoned actuary on that committee. And within 3 years, I was chair of it. So I was just like mind-boggling to me that I would be doing the chair of a committee just so soon after becoming a fellow. So I think if you're engaged, a lot of great things happens to you. So for the better part, have been volunteering. And for the benefit, I think it depends how you approach this. I think there are times where the CIA got more of me or more of out of me being a volunteer than I got it. But for me, I think, I got to know people that I never would have otherwise met. Like, for example, UV. And my life is much richer because I've done that. Like I have a better appreciation for other discipline, and I got to know very interesting people. But there's two aspects of volunteering that I want to make sure people understand, is that especially now we often live in the moment, but being a volunteer, sometimes the benefits are clearer are much later. So for example, right now I'm looking for a board position into the general board of director. And the fact that I've been a volunteer is helping. It also, one of my pet peeves is that if you're not part of the solution, you should be complaining. So for me, being a volunteer allows me to be complaining and be more vocal about the issue, because if I'm also working on solving them. So for me, this is why I think you need to volunteer.
Totally agree about the later part. Well, the whole thing was on the later part, when if you want to have an influence, you need to be at the table in order to raise your concern or raise your problem and stuff. So sometimes that's why sometimes I say like it depends on how much passion or how much perseverance you have at certain issues in order for you to keep going on that, or you're just like, I'm done with that.
Yeah, and you're a very passionate person, V, and I know because we know each other. But and you have a thirst for learning, which I think will be very important in your career. And I'm sure it's already paying off.
I'm learning a lot of different things, and then I'm connecting with a lot of other people too. And I think that's really one, like, I think it's the greatest thing about volunteering is network with other and knowing other people that you can learn and observe. Yeah. So your career has been colorful, and your most recent roles are Chief Risk Officers. So can you tell us a little bit more about like your responsibilities and what you find interesting and challenging as a CRO?
So I've been a CRO for the last 10 years, and I think I'm done. I think there's an expiry date on these roles, because for me, This is the most difficult role I ever had, the hardest that I ever had. I'm more personally, on a personal level, I'm more comfortable when I create and I build than when I'm the second line. So being on the second line means, you have to kind of point out things that needs to be different and let other people make those changes. It's so hard. It's so hard for me. So it was very uncomfortable. And it's also more uncomfortable because the way that I want to do the CERA role. So CERA role is one of those roles that doesn't come with a standard of practice. It doesn't come with industry practice that are well established. So you're kind of making it up as you go along, which is good for me because I don't like boxes, but it's also difficult to necessarily do it. So I wanted to do the CERA role as more of a collaborative, consultative kind of role. So that's more difficult because it's easier to be a policeman than it is to be somebody that tries to influence. So you ask about advantage. Well, for me, being in risk is certainly as a CRO, you have a line of sight of everything. Nothing can get done without you or somebody in your team being aware of it. So, and you need to be engaged in it. So that's really a very good place to be holistic and get a broad view of an organization. So you get to understand all aspects of the business from A to Z. And in my opinion, to be a very complete leadership person in leadership, it really would be a really great benefit to anyone to be doing a stint in risk, because you understand the organization a bit better. But what do you find, V, in your experience? You're in risk. You're a seasoned risk person. There's very few of you. What do you think is the advantage?
I agree about seeing the whole big picture, because like for me, actually, that's what appeals me to risk, like to second line, is like having that big overview. And because it's like, if we're talking about enterprise risk management, it's really about like looking at everything in a holistic view. So it's also open now in my current role, like it's also open me like opportunity to connect with a lot of different people in the organization that I wouldn't think I would have like opportunity to speak to. Like sometimes I think like if you're just in like a pricing area, and if you do very technical work as an actuary, you sometimes it's like, oh, you're just connecting with other actuaries. But I think being in risk, I was able to connect to like other business leaders, other areas, like very broad. So I think that was like the appealing of that, like having that connection and learn more about the business and other people in that sense for me.
Yeah, and I think that's true for all the people in risk, actually.
So what advice do you have for actuaries who would like to specialize in the risk area?
So I would say first, be curious, because you cannot be a good risk manager if you're not curious, because whatever is presented to you, this is only the first layer. So you need to go deeper and understand and be curious in a kind way, but because you also have to be resilient, because V, that we're not often welcome at the table. So we need to be definitely resilient. You need to develop networking skills. So I'm really happy to hear you say that you got to know other people. This is what networking is about. It will help anyone who develop the networking skills will have a much easier getting things done because they have an established relationship with people. You have to listen, because a lot of the things are not really spoken. They're not necessarily verbal. So you need to pick up on cues on things. And you need to also take a step back. And that's really probably one of the most important ones, because too often I see people, especially actuaries, that get attached to the answer. Like it's 8.73%. It's not 9. It's not like, and it's like for me as a risk manager, you need to kind of focus not necessarily on the answer, but on the direction. So if for example, if the business is doing something and it's moving towards where it should be, and it's not going to break the organization, you accept your win and you move on. And you always have a next year or the next time they do a review to push the envelope again. Of course, if it's jeopardized the organization, then it's a completely different conversation. But my experience has been that very, very few things are jeopardizing the organization.
Actually, just experience what you were saying about sometimes it's like we really set on certain like the solution or like what we think would be a great solution, but there are other factors that we have to consider about like the business, the constraint, the resource, the timeline, everything. And then sometimes we just think like, okay, that is a great solution. We should just do it. But there are other factors, business factors that we have to consider as well. So very great advice on that, because I can see that I was
In fact, I think, the one thing that we need to remember is risk management is a long-term game. It's a long-term game. So you cannot focus on the immediate. You have to focus on the long term. That's what the game you're playing.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah. So I actually have been in risk for the past, I guess, 6 years. Yeah, okay. I think that around 6 years now. And I heard like other advisors before that to be a great risk manager, we should try to like experience in different areas in the first line, and like just like have as much experience in more areas as possible. But then like, I'm not sure, but like, it's like, is it still okay for me if I want to stay in risk for like forever? Like pricing actuary or valuation actuary who like just stay there for most of their career. Like, what is your thought on this?
Okay, so I'm the wrong person to ask, because if you looked at my career, I've changed job and I reinvented myself many times. So I would say that for me, and it's better to have a multiple of experience, because it will feed you as a risk manager. And if you walk in the shoes of the person you're advising, it's a lot easier to find solution for them that will work for them than if you've never experienced that role. Having said that, there's a lot of risk manager in banks, for example, that's the only thing they ever done, and they have a really fulsome career. So I think you can do both. I personally think, especially in an insurance company, that if you only have one tool in your back pocket, if you only did one stuff, then you're only aiming for one role in your career progression. And I personally vouch for, especially talented people like you, I vouch for them to be as versatile as possible. So as many skill sets in their toolbox as they can possibly have, so that they can aim to be the chief actuary, they can aim to be the chief investment, they can aim to be the chief claim person, they can aim to be, chief risk officer. You can see that if you have many experience in your background, you can leverage all of this, and then you can step in different roles. If you're only a pricing actuary, you can only just be the chief pricing actuary. So that's would be my career. But again, I'm the wrong person to ask me, because I've only done many things. I mean, I've not been able to focus on one thing alone. So, but I know you're versatile, so I know this doesn't apply to you. But if you're asking me, I prefer people that are well versatile, and I will hire people that have done more things.
So in a way, just like greater opportunities when we have more variety of experiences, in a way. Yeah.
Yes.
So now that when we're talking about like risk management, actually it's more like a non-traditional role for the actuary. Like back then we didn't really have actuaries working in this field, or like internal audit, or like analytics and stuff. So now that the profession is continue to evolve, so what do you believe is like, which skill set or knowledge do you believe like an actuary of the future would need?
Well, that's a great question, and also a very interesting question. So I think, for me, always curiosity is to be there. We also need to have a business mind. A lot of actuaries do not have a business mind. We need to be data scientists. We have to have communication skill. We have to have financial skill. And we have to broaden our views beyond the insurance market. Like, we have a very niche position into the insurance, but we're not there in banking. We're not there in all of that analytic firm. And other are not coming into our field or our niche market, like the data scientist. And so we need to find a way to be more nimble and bring more business value and develop actuaries more holistically. So I guess my belief is that we need to start developing actuary like an MBA program, so that we would have a focus, and you have done your MBA, but we have a focus on data and analytic the same way that we've always had, but we would develop people so they're competing with the MBA, and then they will be more versatile and can go in different industry and be advocate for our profession. If we only stay into insurance, I don't know what the future of our profession will be. Scary. It's actually scary.
Yeah, I have to say, like, when you say about the business mindset, it was like one of the biggest thing for me. It's like sometimes it's just like we still well known as a technical specialist, a number analytical and like problem solving, but in a very quantitative area. It's like sometimes we just cannot communicate or selling certain things as well as an MBA when they say like, okay, give me the number, but it's so what? Tell me the story about that.
Yeah.
And I do think like the society actuaries, the CIA are like trying to push us for improving the communication and the management ability, like this business mindset as well. So hopefully we will continue to evolve and broaden our profession. So if you, at this point, like if you were to reflect on your career journey, what were the pivotal moments that led you to where you are today?
Oh my God, there's so many. There's so many. But I think most of them are related to taking risks. So the first one, of course, is I decided to become an actuary, knowing nothing about it. And then the next one would be when I moved from Quebec City to Toronto, 10 years in my career. At the time, most people that were leaving Toronto, not most people, Quebecers, that had found their first job in Toronto were moving from Toronto back to Quebec, and I did completely reverse. At some point, I was at EY and I was on track for partnership, and I decided to go outside and take a role as a chief actuary. I volunteered to manage the Quebec branch while I was at Markel, and that was my first experience managing regular people, because actually for me are not regular people. They're not as challenging when you manage them. And I love managing people. I love managing regular people. Going to BMO, like I left in a place where I was well regarded, an industry that was well regarded. I joined a bank where I was a small fish in a big organization. I took a year and a half off. I now added diversity and inclusion. I didn't have to do this. I just wanted to do this. And now I'm looking for something even more different, a completely different pivot. So I think, I guess my point is that, every decision you make is a pivot memo. You may not know it at the time you do this, but you have to take risk. You absolutely have to take risk in order to grow as a person and as a professional.
Yes. And I think maybe that's why the SOA has the slogan, risk is opportunity.
Maybe it is.
Yeah. And I can see that. And it just, I guess also being comfortable of taking risks, I guess, like have to try to do that, because sometimes I feel like I'm also comfortable being where I am if I'm doing the same thing over and over again. So yeah.
Yeah, but you also have to go with your own personality. Like, I don't know a lot of people who think at 20 that they want to change job every 3 years. So it tells you something about the person that I am. I love change. You may be different. So you also need to do things that are aligned with your value and who you are. But I would challenge every person, and you've done many challenges, like I know you have. But maybe your listener didn't. So I think it's important that they do.
Yeah, for sure. So this question will be for aspiring actuaries or risk management professional who look for an entry-level job. What do you look for in a candidate?
Okay. So the funny thing is that entry-level job, the entry-level people I haven't interviewed in a very long time, but what I remember is they knew a whole lot more than they thought they knew. So I look for people who are curious. I look for eagerness. I look for kindness. I look for resilience. I look for little small egos. Like, none of my team ever have place for egos. And I look for somebody that has a sense of humor. I think it's very important because, especially in risk, if you don't have a sense of humor in risk, you're going to die. Like, you definitely need to have a sense of humor and be able to laugh with people that you work with. And I look for people that will complement the village that I create. Like, for me, I think my teams, I always call them my village. Like, we need a safe place to be, and we need to add people to this that will challenge us, but also will be part of that community. And I don't know how you do, like, what do you do with your team? But you're closest to this.
Me, if I work with someone, like the personality just like characteristic? Is that because I think like most of us like are qualified to do things already, but it's just like who you work with is very important to make you feel like you wanting to go to work the next day and feel energetic in that. So I'm very like pleased to hear when you talk about like kindness and then like a sense of humor. That I see that because like, sometimes I feel like I have a lame sense of humor, but my leader back then like he also on the same boat. Yeah,
it's important. Like we spend so much time at the office, we have to have a little bit of fun. Cannot be all serious.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I say like feel comfortable as part of a team, that you feel like safe place, like you say, that like we can voice our opinions, because like if we want change and innovation and challenging things, I think it's important that we be able to speak our mind, but then also have to be flexible in our opinion too.
Yeah, but I think you cannot bring your own self to work if you don't feel comfortable. And I try to create an environment where people feel they can be themselves.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely important for the long run. Like you can try to pretend to be someone else in the short run, but it's not gonna work, or it's not gonna be sustainable.
No.
Yeah, I think like our interview so far has been great, and you've been sharing a lot of information and insight. So this to finish off the interview, so it's just like this question will be for qualified actuaries who are working toward leadership level. So to accelerate their career, do you have any advice for them, especially like empower younger women to pursue leadership opportunities?
Well, they should just apply first, because that's the first step. But it's okay to be scared of new things, and it's okay to take a step back. But I think if you want to have the next thing, you need to raise your hand. Like I didn't manage the Quebec branch for Markel because I was just doing my job. I managed it because at some point I said, I want to do something different and I'm ready, even though I may not have been ready. And because I was bored and I need to do something else. And so the first step is raise your hand. You can't let fear of change paralyze you. And I'm not one to talk because I love change, but in order to grow, women in particular will need to go outside their comfort zone. Like we're trying to be so good and perfect on every aspect. Like, so I know it's cliche, but it still happens. When we look at the job description, we check that every single box 6 clicks. Well, most men won't do that. So, think about what you can bring, think the value that you want to bring to this new role, but forget about meeting every single requirement. If you're meeting 60, that's good enough, because there's no one that will have all the boxes. When you do a job description, you put everything and the baby with the bathwater into the job description and hope to get this very unicorn person. But at the end of the day, you only get a person, and so you need to think that way. And also a colleague of mine has now passed away, but I really cared for her, told me once, if you don't apply, your success ratio is 0. If you apply, your success ratio is going to be greater than 0. It's a number game. And for actuary, that should be kind of appealing. It's a numbers game. So you have to apply many times. And at some point you'll get something. But if you don't try, I think the days of really working hard and doing a great job and being recognized for it are behind us. If you don't raise your hand and if you don't put yourself out there, you're not going to get anything.
Yeah. I remember one of my previous leader also say, what is the worst thing gonna happen for you if you apply? You're just gonna get rejected, and that's it. So then you just go for it. So I do remember that, but it's not. I also have to say, not all the time I actually did.
And it's hard, especially if you're visible minority. You're facing rejection in so many levels so often. It's hard. I totally agree. But I think if you don't do this, you're not going to get anything anyway. And it's the one thing that I like people to think about is that a rejection for a job is absolutely saying nothing about who you are as a person. And it's not a rejection of you as a person, but sometimes it's hard to separate the two. But I've been rejected many times. And, believe me, if it takes 12 years to become a CIA, to become a fellow and you can still do all the things that I've done. Like,
Mm.
I had a lot of failures. We didn't talk about failures today, but I had a lot of failures.
Mm.
And so you need these failures to make you more human, and you need these failures to grow. And so you need to embrace those as much as you embrace your success. And I could not be the leader that I am today if I didn't fail.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very important. Failures is a really important part of succeeding, strangely enough.
Yeah, I do think so. Yeah. And especially as an actuary, a lot of us are used to getting failure in the same.
We have practice. We have practice.
Yeah. So, yep. So yeah. So thank a lot for being here today and sharing everything and having an honest conversation with me today. So I wish you all the best of luck on your next chapter in what you strive to do, and hopefully we will have another conversation in the future. Yeah. Thanks again, Elaine, for today.
Well, thanks, V, for including me in this. Like, I never would have thought in my lifetime I would be on a YouTube video. So thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to see you again.
So I hope you find today's video helpful, and if so, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so. So my biggest takeaway in this is risk is opportunity. So we need to be curious and be open for change, and do not fear change because you never know how things gonna be in the future, and it's a long run game. Don't fear change and don't fear failures. It's a part of life, and it's a part of gonna make us who we are. I hope you find today's videos insightful, and I wish you another happy, productive week ahead. See you in another episode. Bye now.